Hey, everyone, and welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament Gospels, looking at the 250 events in the life of Jesus. And today we are looking at Jesus standing trial before Herod. If you looked at yesterday's video, was Jesus before Pilate. Now he passes him on to Herod for good reason, and we're going to look at that. And and this is going to be a short one, it's a few short verses, but we get a little bit of insight into why Jesus got passed around so much with what we're looking at here. And so, starting with verse 8, Herod was delighted at the opportunity to see Jesus because he had heard about him and had been hoping for a long time to see him perform a miracle. He asked Jesus question after question, but Jesus refused to answer. Meanwhile, the leading priests and the teachers of religious law stood there shouting their accusations. Then Herod and his soldiers began mocking and ridiculing Jesus. Finally, they put a royal robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. Herod and Pilate, who had been enemies before, became friends that day. And so, Herod here, he is the part Jewish ruler over Galilee and Perea. Pilate was the Roman governor over Judea and Samaria. And so these four different sections that they ruled over, and because Jesus was from Galilee, that's why Pilate sent him to Herod, and because he didn't know what to do with him, and so he's like, okay, I'll send him to Herod, let Herod deal with it. And so these four provinces, together with several others, had been united under Herod the Great. But when Herod the Great died in 4 BC, it became divided among his sons. And so here we have Herod Antipas, he had two advantages over Pilate, right? One, he came from a hereditary part Jewish monarchy, and he had held his position much longer. So those are the two advantages Herod had. But Pilate had two advantages over Herod in the fact that, one, he was a Roman citizen and an envoy of the emperor, and his position was created to replace that of Herod's ineffective half brother that was there before him. And so it's not surprising that these two men were a little uneasy around each other, because you just didn't know, how politics played around and in that day and how things could be. And so the two were uneasy with each other. They really didn't trust each other. But we see here Jesus's trial actually brings them together, right? Because Pilate recognized Herod's authority over Galilee, he stopped feeling threatened by the Roman politician, and honestly, because neither man knew what to do in his predicament, right? Their common problem united them. They didn't know what to do with him. Because a lot of them realized they were just really, they were passing him around because they didn't really want to deal with it. Like they didn't feel like he had done anything that deserved death, but at the same time, they're ruling over these regions and these areas, and the main thing that Rome was really most concerned about is peace and no uprisings. Right? Make sure they pay their taxes. Make sure everything behaves and there's not unrest and stuff like that, and you're good. And so that was their main concern. And so that was what their main concern was, and they were trying to keep this happening. So it's like, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm going to send this over to this guy over here. And so it was kind of this back and forth that we're going to see. And so what we're going to see tomorrow is, he's handed back over to Pilate, and we're going to see how Pilate deals with this and kind of handles it. And so we'll look at that. And again, like I said, these are short little sections. They don't go into a ton of details, but there are historical documentation that we can look at to see that, yeah, these two people existed, that they, they went through this whole process, and we have it recorded in the Bible about his crucifixion and everything that's set up. And so the main thing that we see here is, everyone's probably asking, I didn't put this in the notes, but it's something we've been discussing. It's like, well, why did Jesus just sit there? Why didn't Jesus perform a miracle? Why didn't he, tell Pilate who he was, or I'm sorry, tell Herod who he was? And so more than likely, and this is, again, it's not recorded, but this is what I think. If Jesus had answered the questions that he was probably asking and showed him who he really was, then Herod probably wouldn't have sent him to be crucified. And so I think that's the main reason why Jesus was silent there, because Jesus knew he had to die on the cross. And he could have done things to probably kept him, I mean, we talked about it last week. We looked at it for last week's is, he didn't have to say that he was who he was. That, whenever he could have stayed silent when he asked him if he was the Messiah, and he said, I am the Messiah, and then he went into talking about how he's going to, well, he knew the minute he said that that was going to send him to his death. I mean, he knew immediately that's what was going to happen. And so, yeah, Jesus could have probably work the system to get out of this, but that wasn't his ultimate goal. His ultimate goal was, he had to be crucified. He had to, and so we see this. It's unfortunate, but and it's our fault. It's the all of it weighs on us. The people back then and us as well. But that's what we see here. And so again, it's just this political game that they're kind of playing right now. Passing Jesus along until we're going to see tomorrow what Pilate finally goes through his process and then hands him over to be crucified, and we'll see that tomorrow. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching, following along, making comments, having conversation. I really enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do so, because we're going to continue to do some different studies, deeper studies as we go along, and we're gonna look at some stuff. But I hope you're enjoying this event, going through the life of Jesus. As always, I appreciate everyone for watching.